good afternoon or morning, depending on where you're watching from. It's another Tuesday, and another Tuesday means we have another full-out chat. Excited to talk with Chris White from Nfinity, also coach at the University of Georgia, Morehead State alum. Great guy. I've met him a couple times. Just a really good dude. I'm super excited to hear his story and to share it with all of you. So, like every coach says, let's do it one more time and let's go full out.
Are you ready? Full out chats. Do you know what time it is? Control, we got the way, we got the vision, you lose the sight. We will never stop. We got the drop, yeah. What time is it? Full out. We're live in 5, 6, 7, 8.
And with music, we are full out. I see Chris has sent me his request to join here. Chris, how you doing, man?
Awesome, man. You just made me do a stand and tuck in this office.
Hey, if you want to do that live on video, you're welcome to, buddy. How are you?
Probably not. I'm really good. How are you doing?
Hey, I just want to thank you again for joining today and to tell your story. We've met a couple times through the cheer world and always enjoyed our conversations. But I just think that what's cool is like you have a story. Like I think there's things about you that people don't know about that would be very interesting. And obviously talk about what you're doing today. So I'm excited to hear your story.
Sure. So originally I'm from Hamilton, Ohio. It's a suburb of Cincinnati. It's about a half an hour northwest. It's a notorious town. It has a couple nicknames, Little Chicago, Hamiltucky. It's Hamilbama. It's an interesting place to be from. It's my generation. There's a lot of cool people that have actually come out of there, especially in the graduating class above me and below me. A lot of famous people. We've had a number of like major league pitchers come out of there. The guy that invented stevia, the edible version of stevia. A lot of like movie producers, Jay Davis out in California, and they work with Rabbit Bindi, like James Franco, those guys. So it's kind of a cool place to be from. But I originally started college at the University of Cincinnati, and I cheered for Tabby there. I was actually playing rugby, and I was recruited out of the weight room by some of the older female cheerleaders. They came up. Tabby was pretty strategic on who she recruited and when she recruited. So she liked to go after wrestlers and rugby players, and she was really good at what she did. I had a little bit of intro to cheerleading. Our cheerleaders at Hamilton, Ohio's a ground-bound state, so our cheerleaders were really, really good tumblers, and they had won a mirror cheer a number of times. They couldn't build, but they were like, 4-time national champion ground-bound squad. So they would always try to get us to stunt with them. So Ace of Ohio back then was one of the first all-star programs. I think that was in like 1995, 1996. They opened up and they recruited the Hamilton cheerleaders to come out there. Well, most of those girls were our girlfriends and friends, so they wanted to stunt, and that was one of the first all-star teams around. So they were trying to recruit the football players to come out there and teach them how to stunt. So there were like 5 or 6 of us went out there and learned how to do like walk-ins and toss hands extensions. We're high school kids. We didn't know what we were doing. But our football coach actually found out that we were doing it. And, at the time we were undefeated going into the state playoffs, and he cut that out real quick. So they went from co-ed at Ace to all-girl pretty fast.
Because, high school football is big, but in Ohio, it's huge. I know it's one of the hotbeds of football. A lot of great college recruits coming to the state of Ohio. And obviously, if you're undefeated, I'm guessing, like you said, it probably did not fly very well with your coach.
No, he was, if you've ever seen the movie Varsity Blues, he was a a cut and paste version of that coach.
Uh-huh.
So, big signs in our front yard for the seniors. And, it's not a big town, but it's not a small town either. So everyone knew if you played football, you got a big billboard in your front yard. So couldn't really do much.
Did you play
get away with it.
Did you play any other sports while you were in high school before you got to Cincinnati? Because you said you obviously were playing rugby at Cincinnati, and football was obviously a love for you. But were there any other sports? I mean, did you come from an athletic family? Was sports just something that was like in your blood from the very beginning?
Yeah. So I played baseball, basketball. I wrestled. I stopped playing baseball my sophomore year. Hamilton is actually known for their baseball team. It's a couple times state champion. Lots of draft picks come out of Hamilton, Ohio. So it's really intense. I probably could have went and started varsity anywhere else in the GMC, which is our conference. But Hamilton specifically, it's really hard to play at, I loved baseball my whole life. I loved football my whole life. So I wanted to play football in college. I had the size by the time I graduated. I had a nagging back injury, and I didn't really follow through. We lost our state playoff game, the first state playoff game. So that was kind of the end of my football career. And I had the itch to hit people. So rugby was a perfect sport for me. So I got to UC and I played rugby there. And I've always played sports my whole life. I can't remember when I didn't. My uncle, he played college football at Wilmington. My mom was always a softball player. What's funny is my dad, he's a bigger dude, but he was in the band. It's more my mom's side of the family. It's pretty funny. So
obviously, like, sports, though, is something you grew up doing, and all of a sudden you get to Cincinnati and you're playing rugby, which I'm guessing is a club sport over there. And then, like I said, Tab, who is still there today. She's awesome. I've met her multiple times. She's a great lady. Like a lot
doesn't age either.
Like a lot of schools, I mean, what people don't realize is, I mean, same at Purdue. I mean, we're literally trying to find guys in the weight room, and anybody who's kind of athletic, like, hey, you want to try this cheer thing out? Because we could always get a couple more guys. So they recruit you, and kind of talk about the recruitment of thinking about becoming a UC cheerleader. Yeah.
So I remember her name. Her name's Jessica Hardesty. She lives in Indianapolis now, I believe. We're friends on Facebook still. But they played on that, the senior girl, and I'm a freshman guy, and that's how recruiting went back then. It was 1998, and you got these attractive girls coming in to recruit. Like, Tabby didn't necessarily have to recruit. She would strategically plan to send, okay, you guys, I need some bigger guys, go up and do your thing. So that's how we were recruited back then.
and it obviously worked.
Yeah, you have, everybody had a name, like, who was your name? Mine was Jessica Hardesty. She's the one that, recruited me. So that generation of folks, the big stunt guy, which is kind of gone by the wayside a little bit since tumbling became like a bigger deal. But back then it was meatheads. Like, you go find the biggest dudes you can that can maybe learn a tuck, and you're good.
Yep. So, I mean, I would say that hasn't gone to the wayside, because I know there's a lot of schools that still just want to get some athletic guys to join. So you're a freshman at UC, and you make the decision to join the team. So kind of talk about that transition from rugby to cheer, and then obviously now you're cheering. You have to learn game day. You have to learn all this. Cincinnati, it has been a competitive program for years. They compete at nationals. So kind of talk about the crash course you got in college cheerleading when you finally joined.
So it was kind of funny. I remember this. The sideline stuff I didn't necessarily know how to do, but I played completely dumb on knowing anything about cheerleading. And remember that I had been practicing. I knew how to do a toss hands extension, and I knew how to do a walk-in already from high school. So I acted like I did not know how to do these things, just so maybe I could get a one-up, or I don't even know what I was thinking. Or maybe I was embarrassed. I don't know. That was a million years ago. But they gave me their smallest girl, which they do with new guys, and they're like, they walked me through toss the hands, and some of the guys that were already in the team were already, kind of still struggling with hands extensions or hands lift back then. So I'm playing stupid, like, okay, grab here and toss and just you catch her feet. I was being ridiculous. So the first time I tossed, I'd never had, no offense to my high school girlfriends, but I'd never had a little tiny person to throw around like that before. So I zipped her butt up there pretty good and I caught an extension at the top, and they acted like I hung the moon for about 3 practices. Like, this kid's a phenom. I've never seen anyone do it before. I finally had to come clean and be like, hey, I used to mess around a little bit. And, after, I'm doing hands cupies in 3 days. So, like, they kind of were like, okay, something's fishy here.
Yeah.
I had to come clean with Tabby and be like, my girlfriend in high school kind of taught me how to do this a little bit.
But it's not like you were doing toss libs or toss cupies or anything in high school. I mean, you were just literally learning the basics at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All I learned was hands, walk into hands extension, and toss hands extension. But, our girls were in high school probably 125-ish. My first partner at UC, she was 135. She jumped to extension. I didn't have to do anything. So, like, she was a gymnast and super talented. So, it's not necessarily being small is the way to go. If they're an athlete, stay tight and jump. I'd rather have that girl.
Oh, yeah. A girl, yes. I agree. I mean, if she can jump to the top, I'm golden. My job's a lot easier after that.
Dude, I like the picture you put up, my Backstreet Boy butt cut.
You gave me the free range to Facebook stalk you, and this is what I was able to find. The awesome, definitely looking like Nick Carter from Backstreet Boys, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, my first away game I cheered was at Memphis, University of Memphis, and I had that haircut, and I have never been ripped apart so bad in my life. I think they had the whole student section singing Backstreet's Back All Right, if that was even a boy band song back then. But whatever boy band song was popular, then they were, like, hounding me the whole game. Like, I was like, geez, you guys are crushing me right now.
People need to realize, all right, man, late 90s, early 2000s, the frost tips, the tipping your hair, coloring it, all that stuff was in. I mean, anything boy band was in. I mean, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what we all did. I mean, come on now.
Which is funny because 2 floors up from me in my dorm, the Lachey brothers were in my dorm.
Oh, no way! Like,
yeah, from
really?
98 degrees. This is a funny story. So Nick was the younger. Not Nick. What was his younger brother's name?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I can't remember his name. Everybody knows Nick though.
Oh man. Anyway, like, we would go out as freshmen, like, hey, there's this frat party, we're gonna go drink some beer, and we were always trying to get him to go with us, and he's like, no, man, I got band practice, and we're like, you're in the band, like, whatever. So fast forward a little bit, we had tried to get him to go a number of times with us, and he kept saying, blowing us off for band practice. I'm like, dude, it's nighttime. Like, how are you going? There's no way you're going to band practice. I moved to Georgia my sophomore year to go to Life University down here in Marietta, and I turn on MTV, and there he is doing the whole.
No.
I'm like, oh, I should have went to band practice instead of the kegger.
You could have been like in the group, or at least like a manager or something.
I could have been in a boy band.
But that's great. So he was literally in the same dorm as you, just right above you. Wow, that is crazy. And I mean, he's a big UC fan. I mean, he doesn't hide that he's a big Cincinnati fan. And
no, he's from the west side of town and huge UC fan. Him and his brother, and they still live there. But
that's crazy.
It's a funny story. I could have been in 98 degrees. Not really, but I always tell people that.
See, these are the type of stories that I love hearing. I mean, if we had met multiple times when that story came out. That's unbelievable. That's so cool. I'm here with Chris White, Nfinity Brands, and also a cheer coach over at the University of Georgia. And we're talking about his freshman year at UC. And then you actually just mentioned it. So after your freshman year, you actually end up transferring. So kind of talk about what happened there and the thought of moving down to Georgia.
Yeah, so the plan had always been for me. My uncle owns one of the largest chiropractic practices in Southwest Ohio, Beckett Ridge Chiropractic. Shout out to Uncle Joe. The plan was for us to always have a practice together. So he went to school at Life. I had visited him a number of times, so I'd seen the campus. Life at the time was the largest chiropractic school in the world.
Oh, wow.
And it was the only place for me from probably my sophomore year in high school all the way through. So I moved to Georgia. I had this little bit of cheerleading experience down here. Life is in Marietta, so this all ties so weird together, by the way. So I started a chiropractic school there, and then I needed a job. So I had met someone who was a cheerleader. His name was Brian, and Brian worked for a company called American Cheerleading Academy.
Okay.
So back in the day, there were like 4 American cheerleading academies. One was in Marietta, one was in Columbia, South Carolina. There was one in South Georgia, and then one, I believe, in Tennessee. Tate Chalk owned all of the American gyms.
Oh, okay.
So the year that I moved down was the year that he sold American Cheerleading Academy to Casey Jones, who is the owner of Stingray All-Stars. So American transformed eventually a few years later into Stingray All-Stars. American in Columbia was purchased by Randy Dickey, and all these guys worked for Tate at the time.
Yeah.
And ACX was born out of that. So American turned into Stingrays here in Marietta. American in Columbia turned into ACX, which everybody knows who Randy Dickey is. So the transformation of those gyms and where I came from. So I was working for Casey under American, and we turned it into Stingray All-Stars with he hired Roger Schonder to come in and create Stingrays. And then Roger left United at the time, and I think the other 2 gyms just closed down, and Tate moved to Hollywood to go be an actor. And he was in that movie Dodgeball. I don't remember that.
Wow,
So,
I didn't even know. Okay, so I knew that you were at Stingrays, but I didn't realize that you were there for like the very beginning of Stingrays. Okay, I didn't know that. Oh, wow. Okay, so you're going to chiropractic school down in life. You're now helping out, or are you coaching at Stingrays then?
Yeah. So Casey taught me how to spot back handsprings. I was the meathead teaching stunt class. Like we had these 20 girls, you need to toss them up for 3 hours. Okay.
Okay.
Here's $15 an hour.
Exactly. Yep.
So he kind of taught me how to coach tumbling. The first back handspring I ever spotted was a girl named Dana Luker. She's actually a mom of 2 now, and she cheered at University of Georgia. She ended up being on Orange, one of the premier teams at Stingrays, which we're still really good friends. But the transition in watching Stingray All-Stars turn from American to Stingrays and just start, that was at the beginning of the mega gym movement where all of the smaller gyms were like, we can't hang anymore, and we had the right coaching staff. We had Roger, we had Scott East, we had Jason Hatcher from Georgia All-Stars. We had like all of these meathead dudes that should not know that much about All-Star cheerleading, but it worked. And Stingrays became this juggernaut in the mid 2000s and turned into what it is today with like multiple locations. And
so did you end up graduating from Life then?
I did. I have a biology degree.
Okay.
So I was in the doctorate program for chiropractic, and I was in 8th quarter. And then, I think 2008 was when the financial stuff hit. So it was a rough time back then. And I had my daughter. So it was time to get a job. Basically, I had my degree, and I never finished the doctorate program. So,
so I remember my first time meeting you. I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember back up in Lexington when they used to have the co-ed stunt clinics? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's where I remember I'm meeting you, and I used to remember we were hanging out, having a great time, but I remember what I was so intrigued by with you was like you kept talking about just angles and lines, and like for sure that had to have come from your chiropractic background in terms of your studies and things like that. I was just so intrigued by how you taught things because of just the way you explained them, and just in terms of like angles and body lines and like structure of body. And it was unbelievable. Like I still remember that to this day, just being so intrigued by you when you were talking about that. I mean, would you say like that was a huge part of your coaching in regards to, and maybe even still today, in terms of like those things you learned from chiropractic school?
Definitely. So they're really hardcore on biomechanics in chiropractic school. So you have to know every angle of every joint, and it's largely science based when it comes to those movements and functionality of muscles, and when a muscle's lax or taut, or like just taking out all the angles that create and remove energy was like a big part of growing back then. And like we were on the cutting edge, really. I hit the right age at the right time where all of these crazy stunts started emerging. Like I'm in that post Doug Stidham, post Pat Wedge group of people where it's like, myself and Guerin and Michael May and Mitch Budlong and Jeremy Lumpkin, that big group of people right there who were just, we were trying to create. And it was right when social media started to get big. Like I have one of the first stunt videos that were on there, and I'm in the gym with King Harrison. We both worked at Stingrays at the time. So we had his wife, Katie, to play with, and her twin sister, Kelly. And these are itty bitty girls from Chicago. So, it was trying to figure out, and even Pat Smith was there too. So it was a kind of a push back and forth who could be the meatheadiest dude, and trying to figure out some of these stunts, like a one-arm rewind, or, pushing the envelope for a triple up and a full in back out rewind. Hand in hands weren't necessarily a thing. That didn't come in for a while, but the original one-arm rewinds, we were standing on the side and spotting them like a back tuck and then trying to step under. Like it was like
oh my God,
the way that, like, I think Guerin kind of figured it out, and Michael May, like, they kind of figured it out first to try to, like, maybe we should stand behind it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even know where that came from. But I remember them, like, Pro X, those videos. So, like, I had a Pro X video, Michael May had a Pro X video, Guerin had a Pro X video, and it was like, who could come up with the coolest, weirdest stunts that you could do back then? But definitely chiropractic, the base and my technique, coupled with Doug Stidham, who I consider a mentor to me, teaching, because he is, if there's anybody that's technical, it's Doug Stidham. And then I look to Pat Wedge next for, technicality and stunning. I do a little subtleties and difference just because my body's built a little different than those guys. But, in 2002, I left and went to Morehead State to cheer for Myron, because I had met Myron before, and he just, caught my heart, and love that guy. He's the best. That's a legend right there. He's probably one of the best mentors I ever had. He's one of the best coaches I ever had. He taught me how, I won't say manipulate's a bad word, but he was one of the best people manipulators, but for the better. So, like, he could get something out of you that no one else could, if that makes sense. He's just the greatest. And up until he passed away, I talked to him about every month. He was just one of those guys that becomes your family father figure. So, I was pretty good when I got to Morehead, but, like, when you get around the Jared Youngs and the John Morgans and the Shannon Richmonds and the, these people that are just, they're badass, man. Like, you have to elevate yourself. I was really, really good at spinning stunts, and I think rewinds were still kind of by the wayside back then, but God, that picture looks like it's from the 70s. But like the back handspring up was brand new. We were one of the first squads to be able to do that collectively. We had 14 couples that could all back handspring up, one arm pull through to stretch, which, like,
and that's what, 2001, 2002?
2002.
That's crazy.
Like,
that's crazy.
Like, and people don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, we were doing back handspring full up pull throughs back then as a squad in the rain on a track.
On a concrete track, the infamous concrete track at Morehead.
So the girl in that picture, Leanne, she's a good friend of mine. We're still friends. So there's a funny story. She gets confused easily. So I was on the end because I was one of the newest members. So Myron's in my ear, and she just watched 13 couples do a full up stretch, full down,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we dip. I'm assuming she knows what we're doing. We get up there, and I catch my grip, and she pulls an arabesque to the front. So I have to do math right now and try to figure out how I'm going to catch this full down. And Myron is screaming at me.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even know how I caught it, to be honest with you. I popped the full down, I caught it, and set her out, and that was one of the only times Myron really, really got in my ear about something. But the dude always got blamed for something like that. Myron was the greatest, man.
How long were you at Morehead?
01, 02.
Okay.
So I went back to Cincinnati for a stint,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I was there for a quarter or a semester, and then I shipped back down to Georgia because Life lost their accreditation for a while because the president was a little shady. As soon as Life got their accreditation back, I moved back down, caught back up with Stingrays, and started working at Stingrays again.
Okay, so you were at Morehead for just 1 year then, one season.
Yeah,
I mean,
that season.
But obviously that one season had a huge effect on you. And
Yep.
let's talk about it. Like, why Morehead? I mean, were they recruiting you, or were you kind of knowing like, all right, hey, I got to leave Life for a little bit, but I want to do this. I want to continue to cheer. I mean, kind of what was the mindset of Morehead and what got you there?
Myron.
Yeah.
100% Myron Doan. I had friends that had cheered there, and they'd always talk to him. But I went to a homecoming with Scott East one year, and that's where I met Myron. And we had like long conversations, and he was like, "Well, you just need to come to school here. You just need to come to school here." So it was the right timing for me with Life losing its accreditation, and it was kind of the perfect storm. And I had some folks up there, a girl named Tamara Cantrell. She cheered there, and I actually coached her at American. She was cheering at Morehead, and she's like, "You should come, you should come." So it was right timing. I was 21 years old, and the
Hello, did we lose Chris?
Yeah.
Chris, you there?
I'm here.
You there?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. There we go.
Sorry.
Hey, this is a live show. That's what you do. You rely on the internet. No big deal. But so, I mean, it's amazing. What I've loved about this whole project is just talking. Really, I've been talking to people from all. I got to interview Pat Wedge, which was actually my first time ever talking to him. And like Pat Wedge was unbelievable. I think that we've lost Chris maybe again here, but we'll see. we'll get Chris back here in a second, hopefully. But we're here with Chris White. We're talking about his move to Morehead. He transfers to Morehead, goes to Morehead State for a year, and 100% says it was all because of Myron Doan, his name has come up multiple times in a lot of my interviews. I mean, just real quick, kind of just if you want, Chris, talk about just the man that is Myron Doan, what he built at Morehead, and kind of just being a part of that legacy.
Yeah, he was a super important person in my life. My time at Morehead was pretty short, but it lasted, all the way up until he passed away. So somebody that affects you that hard, that fast, they're a special type of person. And I know that his legacy is, wow. You can't even go into it. Being associated with Morehead State is something, but being associated with being coached by Myron is a whole different level of awesome. Mm-hmm. And, being one of the lucky few people that had him in my life and talked to him on a consistent basis was just having that person I could call and pick up. He was like, another dad to me. Mm-hmm. And I know that he's been that way for a lot of people.
Yeah.
He's just a great man. He did great things. He was actually like the bus driver at Morehead. And like they're like, hey, we need a coach. But he was the dean of students and did that part-time, and the cheerleading initially part-time, and then it just grew into this juggernaut of a legacy. And I think one of the cool things that maybe no one's told you about Myron is in his fraternity, he was Phil Simms' grand big. So
Oh,
Phil
really?
Simms
I didn't know that.
yeah. Phil Simms is one of the most famous
Yep.
alumni to come out, a Hall of Famer for the NFL, and Myron was his big in his fraternity.
Oh my goodness!
So that's
I did
pretty
not know
cool.
that. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, people talk about just how literally everybody knew Myron and just the impact he had, and I mean, I've talked to Tony Nash and I've talked to Mark Coleman, and just the impact that he had on all those guys, and just forever going to be part of that Morehead program. And so, I mean, you're at Morehead for a year, end up going back to Cincinnati, and then ending moving up back to Georgia and getting back to Stingrays. So now what year we're talking? We're talking like 03, 04, somewhere around there.
Yeah, 2003. That was kind of the birth of the open team. Was around that time. So I still had the itch to compete. Was trying to finish my chiropractic degree. That was the year I started Rust with King, and we had Jervis, who's an NCAA staffer who works in the varsity office. We threw together this team, and Casey Jones was kind of mad at me because that's something else he has to worry about. But we created this team, and I recruited most of our tumblers and dancers from Top Gun. So this was an interesting dynamic here because there were two routines going on the same floor that had to be practiced in two different states. So we didn't have uniforms because Casey wouldn't buy them. So I had to print these like bedazzled shirts, and like that, the uniform that you see in that picture right there, that's one of the newer uniforms. I think that's the last time I ever competed for Rust back in, I don't even know when that was, 11 or 13 or something. But we were in black shorts, and I had to rent a van, and we had our bedazzled T-shirts, and we went down, and we actually had to compete against Louisville. So
nice.
We had like maybe one collective full out, maybe two practices before we competed against probably one of the best cheerleading squads in the world at the time. And, no one had really ever seen us practice or do anything. So we had, and you can go back and watch, it's on YouTube somewhere. So like, but you have this Top Gun routine going on around these West Georgia and local old people stunners. Like we had Benny from UK and like Neil Negrelli was on the floor, who's 1,000,000 years old. He's older than me. And like, we ended up coming .02 from beating them. We got second, and Casey, it was super impressive. Like we had good stunts, and the choreography was great. And Casey cussed me when I came off the floor. He's like, "Now I got to buy uniforms." So that was the beginning of Rust in that level. It was level 6 back then. So we were that close to beating Louisville that year, and then eventually in 08, Rust won Worlds. Yeah, and that was a good time.
I mean, so you're back down in Georgia, and what are you doing for? I mean, is your full-time job working at Stingrays? Is that what you're making a living doing?
No, I went to school during the day. I worked at the gym from like 3 or 4 o'clock until 9, and then I got into my truck and I drove to Buckhead, and I was a bouncer in Buckhead for 10 years. So worked in the nightclub industry. I still have a lot of those friends. Most of them own businesses. I worked at a place called Bar Atlanta, and I worked at a place called The Living Room, and then moonlight at Tongue and Groove every once in a while, and then Lulu's Bait Shack. All those places are gone now. The only one that survived is Tongue and Groove, and they had to move out of there because they knocked all those buildings down.
So, I mean, you're making basically though. I mean, you're like a lot of young coaches at the time. I mean, you're trying to make cheerleading the priority and doing side gigs to make some money, and obviously you're at Stingrays, and around that time, this is when you were talking about kind of now gyms are blowing up. I mean, now All Stars is starting to become. I mean, I'll just say it's becoming the biggest part of the cheerleading industry. It's becoming bigger than high school and becoming bigger than college. And I mean, we're talking multi millions of dollars of revenue through All Stars. I mean, now talk about kind of now your second stint at Stingrays and kind of the growth of Stingrays and kind of, the experience of just being a part of like growing such a now a world renowned gym.
Yeah, it was, that's when a lot of the rule changes were happening. So you had like, back in the day, it was like you had youth, junior, senior, and sometimes you didn't even have youth. So there were 3 divisions, and there was no co-ed, and like if you were a senior team, you competed against an all-girl, competed against a co-ed. So when it started to grow like that, the divisions started dividing up, and then we were all on a hard floor back then. There was no spring floor at the time. So the introduction of the spring floor, all the rules changes, and all of the separation of the division started happening. So it separated into like novice, intermediate, advanced, and then open were the 4 divisions I think we had, and then that expanded obviously further. So watching the social media helped on top of that. So we had some smaller gyms. Gym 1, I see Robin Grinstead hopped on. Hi, Robin. She and Wendy McConnell, who are still at Stingrays right now, their gym came over. They had some kids. We had, Georgia All-Stars youth program came over. All the United kids, which Roger coached. We just absorbed all of the surrounding folks and created this like huge mega gym. I felt like almost overnight. So the success in creating the Stingray way was a big part of the success. So we all sat down and we had our coaches meetings and preseason. This is how this is going to be. And created like a cheer Bible where every technique was broken down. And, that's one thing that Roger was really, really good at. He's a mathematician when it comes to cheerleading. So he sat down and had us all write our little piece, and we all put our input in. And, the staff back there was so into it and so passionate. There are stories of me getting so pissed off. I still probably owe Casey Jones a Bose radio that I threw across the floor because it was down. So it's still very intense and very passionate, but back then I can remember it just being, that was life back then for me. So, that 5-6 years where it was cheerleading was growing, YouTube popped up, and, I got to be the best stunner in the world. And, I just saw Garen do a triple up. I got to do 4 now or whatever it was. So, having those clips, the clip I sent you earlier, it had, 1 million followers when it got shared. Like, I think even Sports Illustrated had shared it at the point, and that was like when not that many people knew what YouTube was, but stunt video became a thing. So I think all of those things that combined grew the industry, and then USASF introduction, and, varsity doing a pretty good job of, having their collective, and then, I don't agree with a lot of things they did, but having that growth in the industry was a big deal, and I think it just exploded at that time.
So what was your last year of coaching at Stingrays?
Well, it's funny. I left and went, and I actually worked for Happy Hooper for a while. So I left Stingrays in 2009, and then I worked for Happy, and then there was a smaller gym, ATL All-Stars up on the north side, that I worked at for a year, I think 2 years out of those 2. And then Casey called me and said, hey, I'm opening up another Stingray location. Would you be interested in helping Brett Lane, get this thing going and running? It was in Johns Creek, and it wasn't too far away from me, because driving to the south side for Ace was super hard for me to do a lot. So it made sense at the time. I love Happy and Brandon, those guys. And I flipped back to Stingrays in, I think, 2011. And then I was there for 4 years, and then I got completely out of cheerleading. Like, I got a big boy job. I had my degree. I was building Spencer ATL. He cheered at West Georgia. He was one of my ATL kids. The company I worked for built command and control centers for the federal government. So I was building like drone rooms, and
that's right. Yes.
I was still doing a little bit of choreography. Like I've done Georgia Southern's choreography for almost 13 years now, and they have 6-7 national titles NCAA wise. And shout out to Barry Casey. But I was still a little bit in cheerleading when it came to choreography and camps, but I didn't coach anything. I was selling these crazy rooms to people in the tech field. And then I woke up one morning and I was coaching at UGA with Ben O'Brien and the brand director at Nfinity. I don't know what happened. I was like,
Okay, so
cheerleading always sucks you back.
okay, so I can't remember who I was talking to before one of my interviews, but we were just talking about how like so many people try to get out. They're like, you know what? Quote unquote, I'm grown up. I gotta get a real job, and it usually sucks you right back in somehow. It always does. But I remember that. I remember running to you at Worlds, and you were just there. I remember you telling me like you're working for the government now and blah blah blah, and I was like, man, that's crazy. Okay, man. And then next thing I know, like, yeah, all of a sudden you're at Georgia, University of Georgia, and working for Nfinity, and it's just I'm like, okay, so he must not be in that field anymore. So kind of talk about like if you can explain it, how did you get sucked back into it? Like when did this happen and all that?
Well, I had been having conversations with Tate and Nfinity, and the Nfinity brand has been a juggernaut in the industry forever. I remember the first shoes actually in Daytona at Stunt Fest with Tate, walking around like, hey, check this shoe out.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? I think there was something screwed up. They had like a golf cleat on the bottom of them.
Oh yeah, no.
And we were like,
yep.
We were like, are these going to be here? Like we were a couple drinks in at Stunt Fest. So
one of my interviews was Mike Perry. And he talked about that they got this prototype and had cleats underneath, and they had to like tell people these won't be here. They won't be there. Like
Yeah, I remember it, and then I'd known Tate before that, obviously through the American Cheerleading Connection and Casey. So, I think he kind of trusted me on, what needed to. Everything else was awesome except for the golf cleats on the bottom. So, I thought it was kind of funny that that's how they were pitching it, and how crazy it is that the brand is that strong that he pitched a golf cleat to a bunch of cheerleaders. And like Nfinity is what it is now, it's the official shoe of cheerleading, and still killing it.
Oh, do we lose Chris? Think we might have lost him for a second. No big deal. But we're here with Chris White. We're talking about his transition into Nfinity and being a brand director with Nfinity, and also at the time becoming a cheer coach at the University of Georgia. Being with Nfinity. So kind of talk about your transition with Nfinity and what do you do for them now?
Yeah, so the Georgia thing was kind of cool. I've known Ben for a long time. He actually worked at Stingrays for a little bit. He had asked, he had a transition of a coach moving out, and he knew I lived up in between Athens and Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So he asked, hey, would you be interested? And I was, obviously. And I could also work, the schedule permitting, I could work downtown with Nfinity and then drive to Athens a couple days a week, and then obviously for games and whatnot. Mm-hmm. But it was just a really good situation for me being in between both companies, because Nfinity, that's the office right there, is in West Midtown, and then Athens is probably 40 minutes north of my house. So it all just was awesome.
Yeah,
awesome timing. I started as a sales manager here, kind of working with the sales team, the reps, for a while, and then Tate thought it best if I got back into a brand position with the amount of people I know and connections in the industry. So, and the growth of Nfinity and having to pivot on certain things, with the Champions League and our camp situation, our new partnership with Next Level, creating summer camps for high school. So
trying to make this happen here. We may have lost Chris again. Hey, it's a live show. We rely on technology. We rely on internet. It happens. Not a big deal. I was going to ask him about kind of the evolution of Nfinity now going into camps and competitions, and then obviously talk about his current role with the University of Georgia and helping out their collegiate cheer program, which is awesome. It could be me also. Okay, Chris left, so hopefully he can come back on here. But again, we're here with Chris White talking about his transition back into cheerleading. He's working for Nfinity, transitioning to a brand manager, kind of using his connections within the industry to kind of obviously promote not just the Nfinity brand, but also how Nfinity is growing. And there's Chris again. Let's see if this works. You there?
Yeah, so there's construction going on outside. That's why I think they snipped our internet for a minute.
Hey, it's a live show, not a big deal. I've been talking with like my bosses and stuff about how you rely on internet, and sometimes you're in the Zoom call and all of a sudden,
yeah,
you're like, are you there?
I saw my frozen face there for a minute.
But I was just saying, so we're talking about you're at Nfinity, becoming a brand manager, and I was going to say about kind of the evolution of Nfinity now lately has been these specialty events, these competitions and things like that. Kind of talk about how they came about and kind of your role in kind of promoting that new type of brand of Nfinity in regards to these competitions and kind of these showcases that you guys are doing with different athletes and different tumblers and partner stunners and things like that.
For the past couple of years, so using the Champions League brand to expand and grow, giving offerings outside of any varsity offerings, which people are looking locally for competitions and not necessarily on their plan. Other options, basically, and then having a different experience than they're typically used to, which the prom and the things that the kids love. Having those like live DJ experiences, and then the unified stunt idea was mine from last year, which was like kind of a no holds barred, no rules, do the hardest thing that you can possibly do partner stunt wise was another thing, kind of to push the envelope back to what it used to be, creating things obviously safely, but doing things you wouldn't typically be able to do at like a UCA or an NCAA partner stunt. And then having these NSA camps, Nfinity Skills Academies, which is another offering we have now. So we've had to pivot a lot. We've had to grow a lot, with COVID and all this stuff going on. So it's keeping the doors open. We're a smaller company, but like the brand is huge. So we're in a good position now, and the brand I feel like is stronger, especially with forcing us into our social media corner, which I feel like we own. And having our live folks on, we had a guy on today who's a circ performer doing trampoline up onto a
I saw that was awesome.
Yeah, so keeping an open mind, keeping everybody flexible, and keeping the brand strong. That's my job. So it's been a cool ride.
Obviously, I love the Nfinity TV you've been doing has been awesome. Like you said, bringing in different people to talk. I think that's very smart. Like I said, during these times, you got to stay relevant. You got to keep the name out there. But something that we can have in common and talk about real quick, we got about 10 minutes here, is obviously college athletics and how COVID's affected that. Something I thought was really cool that I saw a couple years ago is you starting to help out at the University of Georgia, which is obviously a great school, great football. I mean, unbelievable game day, I'm quite sure. But kind of talk about going into college coaching and kind of just how that has changed your life also.
Yeah, so I've always been a highly competitive dude, and been at competitive schools and competed with Stingrays on open teams. So competition cheerleading had always been something that was super important to me, being a coach for almost 20 years now. But the University of Georgia, we don't compete. So I had a different focus now, and it was sideline cheerleading, which I knew, but it wasn't necessarily a huge passion of mine. Well, I'm from Ohio, so I've been an Ohio State fan my whole life, and then I go to UC, and I become a UC fan for life, and I got the little Bearcat.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So like I'm transitioning into that role. It was awkward at first, but then spending my first season watching Georgia football from the sidelines, it's a whole different thing going on in the SEC. Like it's I've been to multiple Ohio State games, been to Ohio State, Michigan, been to a lot of Big Ten games, but there is nothing like SEC football when it comes to the passion of the fans and the sideline experience and the game day experience. So the amount of pressure felt to do good on the sidelines and do good pregame, it's equivalent to a competitive atmosphere. You know, Georgia competitive. Ben did an awesome job. There's so much talent at the University of Georgia, like with all the gyms that are around here and in the Southeast that, you know, you have the Stingrays down the road and Pro Cheer and Georgia All-Stars and, you know, Jayhawks, all these gyms around here and, you know, Atlanta All-Stars. So, like, you have this pot to pull from, plus Georgia high school cheerleading so intense that it's interesting to watch those kids go from a competitive mindset to whatever Georgia football, Georgia football cheerleading is, because it's addicting. You know, when the stadium lights go down and all the LEDs light up. You know, when you're playing Notre Dame at home, like there's nothing like it. I can't even like put into words what it's like. That feeling you get, it's goosebumps for 30 minutes straight when you see the lights shut down in the fourth quarter. So it was pretty cool. I coach co-ed there. We have Ashley is the all-girl coach and Ben is the head coach and director. So there are three of us that run the program, and Ben's really organized and does an amazing job. And I get to coach co-ed stunning, which is you know, my passion. So it gets my coaching fix, even though I've stepped out of it, and it's really fun. Like, game days are really, really fun.
I cannot express, like, I am so glad you just said what you said. I'll probably use it as a sound clip some other time. I tell people, I don't care if you have won worlds or if you've gone to high school nationals, nothing can prepare you for big time college game day. It's just a different nerve. It's a different thing. But I don't know, like, there's no cheer competition that can put 80,000 people in front of you. It just yeah. And it's unbelievable. Like, I 100% agree with you, Chris. I mean, it is a different experience, and I just try to tell any kid, if you can cheer in college, do it. You'll love it. It's unbelievable. Yeah,
and a lot of the kids that we get are those all-star kids that have gone to Worlds, and they're like, okay, I'm done with competitive. I've you know, they've been a Georgia Bulldog fan their whole life. You know, their parents went there or whatever. So it's kind of cool to watch these legacies come through and you know, watch them live their dream of being on the sideline in a Georgia game. There's nothing like it. So it's pretty great.
So we got about 5 minutes here. So one last thing I did want to talk to you about is just kind of about you is, you know, then obviously you become a married man and you start, you know, having a family, and obviously that's going to have an effect on any person's life. Got to kind of just talk about, you know, the family life. I mean, obviously it's something that's very important to you, and you're juggling it with coaching and with working in Nfinity and things like that. So kind of just talk about, you know, being a married man and raising a family during this time and trying to make it work with cheerleading.
Sure. So I have 3 kids and an awesome wife. Carter is 13 this year, so that might blow some minds for some folks. She was on that first wave of cheerlebrity kids, whatever that means.
I remember that. She was like, I remember that. Yep.
Yeah, she was a little itty bitty and, you know, 5 years old with the bob and, you know, hardcore cheerleader. She obviously moved out of cheerleading for a while. Roger ended up being her stepdad, and her mom still works for varsity on the fashion side. So she's still involved in cheerleading per se, but like she doesn't compete anymore. She likes lacrosse and that type of thing.
Oh, cool. Okay, very cool.
Yeah. So she's a big bookworm too. But it blows people's minds when they see Carter now and they're like, you know, she's a teenager and not a cheerleader. So it's odd for them because they picture that little girl in the varsity catalog with her little bob. And I just recently had a little ginger right there. She's 2 months old now, and Colt is a all boy, man. He rides 4-wheelers and, you know, wrestles, and he's a bruiser. He's in the creek. I gotta, you know, watch him with picking snakes up and that type of thing. So
yeah.
He's it's cool being a family man now. And, you know, my wife actually, she was a complete badass. She cheered on a scholarship at HPU back when HPU was, you know, the bomb. So she
cheered with my assistant coach, Nicole.
Yeah. She's a complete stud, and she'll actually get out on the trampoline and still throw full. So
really,
she's a genetic freak, man. She's had a baby 2 months ago, and she already has abs. So
So I hate her. Okay, it's fine.
Yeah, so it's so weird. I have one app. I have just one solid app that I like to keep, and I paid good money for it, so I'm going to hold on to it.
It's bought and paid for. You don't want to get rid of that. You put a lot of work into that.
I did. There's a lot of time and chicken wings put into this thing.
I talk to people all the time about just, obviously kids change lives and marriage changes lives, but it's good that it's got to be great that your wife understands the business. She was in it. She understands just the love and passion for it. Now that, we're obviously dealing with the COVID and everything like that, kind of what is the next game plan for you? What's the next step? What's going on at Georgia? Do you know if you guys are going to be able to practice anytime soon? Also kind of Nfinity, like you've started off a couple things, which have been really cool, but kind of what's the next step for Nfinity and kind of the future plans for there?
Yeah, so we're in a state, Georgia, where we have a lot of traction. So the sales side for camps should be pretty good for us since people are scared to go to these big away camps now. So the focus has been camps. That picture before that where I'm actually flying, two of those guys, my back spot, that's Greg Gilbert, who won partner stunts with Delaware, and Doug Stidham, who is a stunt legend right there, who won partner stunts multiple times. And then Ian Fitzpatrick is the bald guy who won multiple national championships with West Georgia. So I
tell people, if you watch Doug Stidham and Brooke Davis from 97 or 98, whatever, that crazy routine, that could be competitive today because they would just add a couple flipping stunts and be fine. Unbelievable.
Still winning.
Yeah.
Still winning.
Yep.
But, yeah, that's funny. That the plan for Georgia, we're looking at tryouts in July. They've welcomed us back to campus June 8th.
Oh, okay.
We're kind of waiting for football.
Yep.
So I think the plan for tryouts is possibly the 23rd of July, not locked down yet, but we have to look at gym schedule at Stegman and that type of thing. So
sure.
That's the plan there. We're really pushing our camps and sales. We have a full warehouse at Nfinity right now, so we're in a good spot when it comes to inventory. So if there are any coaches watching, you need to put your orders in now so that you're in the front of the line and you're ready to go for shoes. Because I know China's still kind of shut down a little bit, and folks are having inventory problems with their shoes and uniforms. So we're in a good spot on both fronts. Georgia's open all the way. I'd like to get to a beach here soon because I have a little bit of cabin fever, but that's the plan for the next month or so.
Chris, I just want to thank you for your time today, bud. I as internet issues, that's what you do in a live show. You just keep moving on. No big deal. I just want to say thank you. It was good to catch up again. Thanks for the stories. The Nick Lachey story was awesome. And Phil Simms story. This is what I love about doing this, is just finding out these stories, man. It's been awesome. So just stay safe, man. And hopefully our paths cross again soon at the small world called cheerleading. So I'm sure we'll see each other again sometime.
Thanks for having me on, man. It was fun. And, there's a million more stories that we could tell. So we'll go down the rabbit hole. Hopefully I can get up there. I've never been to Purdue. So
I would love to have you. Any time you want to come up, let's figure it out. That would be awesome, bud. That'd be great.
Definitely, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, Chris. Have a good one, buddy.
All right, buddy. Bye.
Chris White, I knew it would be an awesome interview. So cool about Nick Lachey. Nick Lachey lived in his dorm, and that's unbelievable at Cincinnati. And then Myron Doan, I didn't know that he was in the same fraternity as Phil Simms and actually knew Phil Simms. That's unbelievable. So it's stories like that just make things awesome. So thank you again, Chris White, Nfinity Brands, and also coach at the University of Georgia. So Thursday, we have our final full-out chat of the week on Thursday, and we have Caitlin Sexton with V-Rock, UCA college staff, former USA All-Girl, and also Hofstra cheer alum, multiple national championships there at Hofstra. One of the best instructors, one of the best flyers you will ever meet and get to work with. I have her on Thursday here on Full Out Chats. It'll be awesome. Thank you again to Chris White for his time today. Really appreciate it, buddy. And one more shout out to one of our sponsors, Cheer Chalk, cheerchalk.us. Go to cheerchalk.us, put in the Full Out 10 discount code and get an additional 10% off. So again, cheerchalk.us and put in Full Out 10. Thank you all again for joining. Hope you enjoyed this Full Out chat, and I will see you on Thursday.